Hey guys, if you're struggling with the overwhelming challenges of chronic fatigue, please know that you're not alone. And what's even more important is to know that there is a way out. Many people have recovered from this and are now thriving. Hi everyone, I'm Raelan. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel, we share insights, knowledge, and resources that we have learned to be helpful with conditions like ME/CFS and long COVID. So how do we know these things? We've learned it from the more than 150 recorded recovery interviews right here on the channel. I'm excited to have Frances Goodall with us today, all the way over in Sheffield in the UK. Frances has an incredible story of overcoming ME/CFS and has used her knowledge to help others to also return to living fully, like she does today as a working mom and an outdoor enthusiast who has even completed 3 half marathons. So let's dive right in and welcome Frances. Frances, so amazing to have you here. Thank you for doing this today.
Oh, thank you for having me on your wonderful channel.
So take us back. What was happening around the time when you first became unwell?
So when I first became unwell, I was quite young. I was only 19. I was at university and I was doing all of the things. I had a job, I was studying hard, I joined all the different societies I possibly could join and, developed a new friendship group and was going out a lot. And then suddenly one day, actually, I was on my way to do some voluntary work and I just didn't feel well at all. Didn't know what was going on. Felt a bit fluey, felt a bit strange, felt a bit scared because it felt really weird. And then, yeah, that was the start of it, really. I ended up not being able to continue my university studies. I ended up having to come back home and live with my mum. And I think it probably took about I think it took 6 months to get a chronic fatigue or ME diagnosis. Yeah.
You can tell when someone went through this a while ago, it wasn't last year or the year before, because I feel like we've developed this ability to just zoom through that one of the most intense experiences of our life. Like, yeah, so I became unwell and then I had to drop out of university. And,
Yeah.
that had to be a really scary thing at such a young age. When you started not feeling well and weren't getting better, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I was. Well, I also I had a doctor wanting to diagnose me as being depressed, and that being the main issue as well, like very early on. But I knew it wasn't just depression. I knew there was emotion about feeling unwell, and I was emotionally challenged by that. Was probably getting depressed by that, but I knew there was something else going on. So yeah, it was really scary time. Definitely a time that I feel like I've grieved and worked with as I healed, at the other end, which is probably why I can talk about it so lightly now. But yeah, it was at the time it was really, really scary, and I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to do. Yeah, and at first I kind of gave up a bit. I went home and was kind of even doing things like watching daytime television and just feeling a bit low. And all my friends from home had gone to university. All my friends from university were still at university. So initially, I didn't really have anyone there other than my family, and yeah, it was a very tough time.
So doctors told you that the cause of all this was depression.
Yeah, one of the first doctors said she just thought I was depressed. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of us hear that, and it's, I think, a little bit infuriating. I can see how they come to that conclusion because we likely are depressed, but that wasn't, for most of us, the first thing.
Yeah.
Take away
exactly.
someone's ability to function in the world, and anyone's going to be depressed.
Yeah.
So what did you do? Did you just start Googling, or how did you start to try and figure your way out of this?
In the year before I got ill, I had also traveled the world before going to university, and I had got really interested in meditation and Buddhism and yoga a little bit as well. So I did think quite early on, well, perhaps meditation and yoga can help me heal. So I did start quite early on doing a little bit of meditation, yoga, a little bit of breath work. Like, for instance, I remember one time doing the alternate nostril breathing and noticing I felt different after doing it. So, or doing a relaxation. I often listen to relaxations as well, guided relaxations, and then doing them. Sometimes I'd notice I felt considerably better after doing one. So those sort of experiences quite early on gave me some hope that there was something I could do about getting myself better. But often it was just like feeling better for a little bit and then I'd feel much worse again. So it took a long time to learn to really get a deeper shift, or it took 5 years to get fully well, but it was a very up and down journey as well. Yeah.
So I imagine you tried some things over those years that didn't work. What were some of those things?
Well, for example, quite early on, I remember going to an acupuncturist who had written an article that said, "Me and my ME chronic fatigue recovery cure." And I was like, oh, this is going to be the thing that's going to cure me. So I had some acupuncture, and she gave me some herbs as well, which just tasted so bad. And no, it's not that I've got anything against acupuncture, because I love it. And over the years, it has been good since then. And it did help. It did help on some ways on my journey. But that particular acupuncture or series of sessions didn't seem to do anything for me at that point. But maybe it just wasn't the right thing at that point, you know. But later on, I do think acupuncture did help a little bit. I've not got anything against Chinese medicine or acupuncture, but it was yeah, it didn't particularly do anything in those early stages. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I would at some point I started like trying one therapy after another. You know, I'd go for Reiki, and I'd go for this and I'd go for that, and you know, try different kinds of alternative therapies. I went to a nutritional therapist. She did colonic irrigation, but I didn't even know. Apparently, I'd booked in colonic irrigation, but she gave me some nutrition advice, and I do think I did have a, you know, like a candida issue as well. So that perhaps was somewhat helpful to learn a bit about the body and things like candida imbalances and things like that. But at the same time, it wasn't that helpful, I don't think. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Colon irrigation, is that like colon hydrotherapy? Is that the same thing?
They put water up you and like flush out your system. Yeah, I've never had it done. I didn't go for it, but it was so, in a way, it was kind of funny that I hadn't even booked in for this session. But I didn't think I had. I thought I'd booked in to see a nutritional therapist, again, because my dad had told me that she'd helped cure someone of chronic fatigue, you know, so it's like following these different things, these different lines of possibility for hope and a cure. So
I ended up doing colon hydrotherapy as one of the zillion things I tried to get well. And
did you?
People watching, if you've never tried it, you haven't lived through this experience fully, I think. It's funny though, I ended up meeting one of my best friends ever. She was my colon hydrotherapist. I think you just bond really quickly. Like you get past all the small talk once you, oh, you're... Anyways, it's the stuff that we all try to find out well. It's just, yeah, that level of desperation.
As well, before even all this, you know, cold therapy that's about these days. But back then, I remember reading an article about how cold can help you, and I'd lie in cold baths, and I did often feel better afterwards. But I mean, I'd be there lying in a cold bath, trying to get myself well and stuff. Yeah, it's quite funny, really.
I know, you think about it. We're going through this incredible suffering. We have all these scary symptoms, and then we're like getting hoses put up our bums and laying in freezing cold bathtubs. It's like as if the suffering isn't enough. We just gotta, but you're just desperate. You're like, okay, if it even works for one person, I gotta try it. It's amazing though how for everyone I talk to, your mind just suddenly becomes very open.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Yeah, I would try one thing and then the next thing and the next thing. And I even flew to America from, I mean, I'm in the UK, and I flew to the US, to Florida, to work with a healer that apparently had healed quite a few people of chronic fatigue as well. So yeah, just like loads of things. I was so desperate to be well and to figure out what was going on. Yeah.
Okay, so eventually you did start to find some things that did help. So what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, actually, 2 years into the illness, I was doing a lot of meditation, and I had an experience of meditation of a lot of energy flowing through my body. And then I felt amazing. Like I felt like something had shifted. But actually, I ended up in quite an unstable kind of up and down process for 3 more years after that. But I did think I was cured after 2 years through this meditation experience, which is a bit mad, but I was a bit intense about my meditation practice. And I think I did have a kind of a release of energy, but it was just not sustainable. And yeah, I still had a lot of things to figure out in myself. But the things like towards the end of the recovery journey, I read a book on reverse therapy and nickel therapy. They were 2 practitioners, I think, that around the time they were working together at one point around reverse therapy, and then they split off and did their own thing. But I think I read both of their books, and yeah, something in that was like a bit of a light bulb for me about one of the key things I realized in myself was I had a massive pattern of like avoiding conflict at all costs. Like I could not possibly share something that might upset somebody else. So I would just shut down. And I think recognizing that pattern was one of the key parts for me to be able to get better and to sustain my health. And I also didn't realize that I had quite a bit of suppressed anger and unresolved trauma in my system that I didn't realize was there. That kind of sort of started to come through in the various workshops and therapy sessions and coaching sessions I had during the 5 years to try and heal.
Okay, so you mentioned 2 things there, reverse therapy and Mikel therapy. So the first one, reverse therapy, what does that look like?
Yeah, to
people
be honest,
are.
they're very similar. I can't remember the exact difference, but it was about looking at symptoms and getting curious about symptoms and what is there an emotion underlying this symptom. That's what I remember from it, and starting to like really like check in with myself and try and be more in tune with what was actually going on for me emotionally. And yeah, so that was a massive part. I mean, looking back, I do think, and all the research I've done around trauma, I do think a lot of it for me was the impact of trauma on my system manifesting physically, like a freeze response. I don't know if how you've got your perspective on that kind of stuff is, but because even after I got better, sometimes I'd go a little bit like a bit fatiguey again, and then I'd have to kind of work on something, and then I'd feel back to normal again. So it was, yeah, it was for me a lot of it when I look back, I think was to do with the freeze response in my nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a theme. I couldn't begin to count how many people who have said something similar in their interview about that being a key piece of their recovery. And it seems to be a core component of many recovery approaches.
Yeah.
Like Dr. John Sarno, we hear a lot about his TMS approach, and lots of that theme of is so mind-blowing to me. This is, I think, one of the most fascinating topics to me is how much those repressed emotions and that unresolved trauma can impact our nervous system and our brain and create all these symptoms, and how much so many of us don't realize in our modern day society that we're walking around feeling like we are suppressing these things, these feelings of anger and rage. Like, I don't know, I need to be a certain kind of person as a woman or a mother or a father, or I need to be okay with working 70 hours a week, or, I have shame around this, or it's not okay to feel this way, or it's not okay to express my emotions. And just by tampering all that down for all these years, our system starts to recognize those feelings as scary and bad. And it's fascinating how the body creates all these symptoms as a distraction, or is it because it's being hypersensitive, or whatever the different theories are. But just understanding that and bringing that into light seems very impactful for a lot of people.
Yes. I mean, I have one really strong example where I started to really understand the mind-body connection. I was with a group of people. We were actually doing Reiki on each other. It's like a Reiki share. My boyfriend was there. I was making tea for everyone. My boyfriend was getting triggered because he thought I was going to tire myself out by doing too much, and that he was going to have to pick up the pieces afterwards. And then I was getting angry with him because I felt like he wasn't trusting me. But I think it was just triggering some old stuff as well. And then but I couldn't handle the anger. So I remember just thinking, like, I can't feel this. I don't know what to do with it. So just shut it down. But then I could hardly walk. And then I had to just lie down on the sofa. And then he said something again that triggered me again. And I just ran upstairs. He said, "Oh, see, I told you this was going to happen." And I was like, "Not because of that. It's because I'm angry with you. I don't know what to do with it."
Yeah.
Well, at one moment I was lying flat, the next moment I could run up the stairs. I was like, okay, this is really odd.
Yeah. So what did that look like for you, starting to understand this mind-body connection? So what does that mean for you starting to feel better and come out of this? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it looked like learning to be more myself, more authentic, learning to express myself more authentically. I remember learning nonviolent communication. So I felt like then I had a bit of a way that I could like communicate my feelings without it also being too much for someone else, which I think initially, because I had been so suppressed, things would come out quite strongly at first. I remember Alex Howard, I trained with him in coaching, and he was talking about the pendulum that can swing from being very repressed to then the other way, or a pendulum can swing from being one way to the other way, and it's almost like coming back into balance again. So I did notice that it was almost like I went from being so suppressed to then quite reactive, and then had to learn how to be able to be authentic with people, communicate my needs, my feelings, that it's okay to have needs, all these kind of things. And but also to do things like continue to look after myself and prioritize time in nature, prioritize time with friends, prioritize self-care, as well as once I was better, I did start developing my work and stepping into the world of work again after a long time of not being in the world of work, and but doing it in a way that was trying to be as balanced as possible and not too out of balance. So yeah.
It's so interesting that so many of us go on this journey, let's call it. I mean, it is a journey, but it can be very tough experience becoming so unwell. And for many people, it lasts years. But it ends up being this teacher about how to, like you said, be more authentic, take better care of yourself. It is an amazing teacher. And, most people do come out the other side of it so much happier and more content and at peace and better equipped to deal with their life and their emotions and their health and the world. It's fascinating. I don't think most of us, if you told us that coming into it, we'd probably think you were crazy, because it
Yeah.
sounds, even after doing all these interviews, and I know it's true. I
Yeah.
know this is the case for so many
Yeah.
people. It's still, every time I hear it, my head kind of explodes.
Yeah.
You're so sick. And someone's like, you need to lead a more authentic life. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it definitely wouldn't have made sense when I first started to get sick. But looking back,
Yeah.
absolutely, in a way, I can be grateful for how much I learned through that journey of, getting sick and figuring out how to be well again. And yeah, so much learning.
So you've talked a bit before, or we talked a bit before this call, preparing for this, about the spiritual elements of your healing journey. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know if you've had anyone on the channel who's shared anything like this. I have had the odd client that's come to me with this, but I also had a Kundalini or some kind of spiritual awakening during my healing journey, which is, I think, why the ups and downs were so intense. I think there was also a kind of trauma element of it, like dissociation, like coming out of my body. Definitely was part of the condition for me, and part of what I had to work with afterwards was to learn really how to be in my body. And I think spiritually, I found something like meditation where I could have these really beautiful experiences. Sometimes I felt like I left my body and I was like connecting with the whole universe, and it felt really amazing. But then I was really struggling to function in my life, and my health was still all over the place. Sometimes I'd feel quite well, and other times I'd crash again, things like that. So the spiritual element was an important element of my journey. And yeah, it's hard to describe it. But I have also witnessed some other people who have also had that experience. So I was kind of, happy to talk a little bit about that element of my journey. Yeah. And I got deeply into meditation, was reading so many books about Buddhism and meditation. And sometimes I was meditating at times when I was sick, 3 hours a day. And I actually got to the point where I had to stop meditating for a while, because I was kind of using it in the wrong way. I was using it to sort of escape everyday reality and have these mystical experiences, but then actually finding it harder to function in everyday reality. So I had to sort of, learn to do normal things for a while and connect with nature and, be able to have a normal conversation. I think after like 5-year healing journey, and then all the spiritual experience as well, it was like, I just found normal life a challenge to integrate back into, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
that's a really good point. Yeah, yeah. Because then once you're well and feeling better, the rat race of the world is waiting for you, and you have a whole bunch of people that haven't been through what you've been through, especially at such a young age. I imagine
Yeah.
just emotionally matured much more rapidly than most of us do at that time period in our lives. So it's probably challenging to connect, or just see how this all fits together.
Yeah.
It sounds like this has changed you a lot. So clearly, this whole experience has changed you a lot. So, what has life been like since you've been well?
Yeah. I mean, life has been good overall. I mean, overall, I feel like I've learned how to experience a lot of joy, a lot of inner peace. I have a great community. Yeah, I've had a child. I've got a son who's 10. Yeah, and life's been rich and great. And I've, done lots of different kinds of therapeutic and coaching trainings, and been working in this field myself nearly 20 years. So yeah, there's been lots of great things. I've run half marathons. I think I did what partly want to prove, like, to the world and myself, I am fully well, Yeah, so yeah, life's been good, and I feel like I definitely learned so much through that time that shifted things for a deep level for me, and also kept me interested in personal growth, because I was like, well, how if, like, doing some emotional work and spiritual work can heal chronic fatigue, then where else can I go with this? How much joy can I create in this lifetime? How much ease can I create? And yeah, so I do keep up quite a few of the practices that support me to heal, and new practices, always learning new things. And I do feel like I'm a lifelong learner as well. I'm always fascinated by learning new things. Yeah.
Wow, I was just listening to you talk. Like, how do I have more you in my life? This is incredible. I'm so inspired by how this has changed you, and it's just the spiritual development and, that continuous growth. I'm curious because a lot of us think of recovery from these conditions like there's a finish line where that chapter ends and then the rest of your life starts.
Yeah.
But in reality, a lot of people find it's more of an ongoing journey. So, what's that been like for you? Is there self care things you need to still do? Do you, is there any part of you that's worried about, becoming unwell again? What's life kind of post recovery been for you?
Yeah. I mean, it has been a really long time now. So yeah, it's been maybe 17 years since I'd say the 5 years was up. But in those years, especially in the less so in recent years, but definitely the sort of my later 20s, early 30s, I did have periodically sort of what I would now describe, even back then I didn't always understand it, would be like trauma type symptoms would come up. Like I'd feel a bit shut down or a bit dissociated and I wouldn't know why. And then I'd have to go and do some like work on myself with a practitioner, or perhaps I'd go and spend some night time in nature and that would regulate me. But I did have to quite regularly kind of figure out how to regulate myself again when things were out of balance. And that can still happen today, but not to the extent it was still happening in my sort of late 20s, early 30s, and not as often. So yeah, but that was when I guess sort of started to see that it wasn't all about being chronically sick, and definitely wasn't about being chronically sick anymore. Like I don't worry about that, and I didn't worry about that. I mean, maybe a little bit in the early stages because I was a bit kind of like, oh, I've been ill for all these years. Now I need to make up for it. I need to go and help at these retreats that I used to go and just receive at. I need to go and do all these things, and I need to get this message of healing out into the world. And, you know, and there was a bit of a kind of pushy energy in all of that sometimes. But overall, no, I never worry about getting chronically sick again with chronic fatigue. So, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. And clearly, this also shifted or influenced your career trajectory. So, tell us a bit about that.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, my first training was with Alex Howard and the Optimal Health Clinic and their therapeutic coaching training. And well, actually, even before that, I trained in some body work and just doing the Bowen technique. So I actually started out, I was a bodywork practitioner. And then in time, I ended up connecting to Ashok Gupta and Amita Training Program, and ended up being a coach for the Gupta program, which I have been for since 2008, so a really long time. And so that's kind of been a lot of my work actually. It's been at being a coach for the Gupta program. But in more recent years, I've trained in internal family systems, IFS work, which is like working with inner parts. So I also work with people with IFS as well, not necessarily through the Gupta program, but just people with that model as well, that therapeutic model. So yeah.
Wow, what a wealth of information and knowledge and insight you are from all of this. That's just incredible. Over the years, the many years that you've now been doing this and working with people, has your understanding of these conditions or recovery changed? Do you see a lot of variety in people's paths to recovery? And what are some of the biggest takeaways from the work that you've done?
Yeah, there are lots of different things, but the power of recognizing the mind body connection and starting to understand that and do the work around that. One piece that's perhaps a bit unique about what I bring is that looking back, I feel a lot of my trauma wasn't necessarily personal, but was ancestral, was kind of more that I sort of took on from my family line. So that's a piece sometimes I see in clients that perhaps isn't spoken about so much that sometimes, and particularly when people are like, oh, not much happened to me, but then you find out their mother's ill and their grandmother was ill or something like that. And I'm like, what's going on in that family line that's created this pattern of illness, for example? So yeah, I also trained in family constellations work, and that's all about kind of how we're affected by our wider family system and how an illness in one person might not be the root of that problem, might actually be a more systemic or kind of wider family system issue. So yeah, that's an interesting perspective.
It's fascinating. I read about a study recently in animals, and they can trace back if they have, let's say, a dog mother that has trauma, they will see health problems in her children up to 3 generations after that.
Yes.
From that, and this is a study with dogs. So I can't even imagine how this all. I'm sure I'm oversimplifying what you're saying here, but just the impact of the culture of our families is. I think there's just so many things that we don't understand fully about what impacts our health and our functioning in the world. And it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Frances, so grateful for you to being here today. Thank you so much. For people watching, everything you need to know to connect with her will be in the video description. Of course, please expand that and check that out. Just Adore you. So glad we've met. So appreciate you taking the time to share this today. The world is so much better for having you in it. You just radiate goodness and insight and light. And so glad that we connected. So thank you for doing this today.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for your amazing work. Yeah.
And for those of you watching, if you haven't already signed up for my newsletter, I know there's a lot of recovery interviews and it's a lot to keep up with. So every week I send out an email with just the bullet points, like for people, what worked, what didn't work, the key resources that got them there. So if you're worried about missing out on anything, you can sign up for that there. And I also just want to send a quick shout out to our channel member, Mark Plain. Thank you, Mark, for joining the channel. I really appreciate the support. Big hugs to you on your journey. If you're not if you're not already a channel member, you can click the join button below to learn more and get access to perks that no one else gets. That's it for today. Thank you again, Francis. Thank you to all of you watching. Big hugs to you. Whatever you're going through, keep at it. You have totally got this. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did this interview. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I hope to see you in this next one.